Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Sovereign Sisters podcast, which I'm calling this one The Crossroads of Truth, Unfiltered, Uncensored, and Unveiled. I'm your host, Angela Atkins, and I invite you to join me on a journey through one of the most profound challenges of our time, understanding and uncovering the truth. Today's episode is all about truth, not just truth as a concept, but truth as a living, breathing part of our lives, something we all seek, yet so often struggle to find. Truth in the modern world is elusive, tangled in layers of propaganda, misinformation, and bias. In an age where information is endless but clarity is rare, it's never been more difficult to know what's real and what's not. Everywhere we turn, there are voices claiming to reveal the truth. There are truth tellers, whistleblowers, insiders. But how do we know who, if any, holds the actual truth? And then these so-called truth tellers, the individuals who claim to have insider knowledge, secret access, or a unique perspective. They offer clarity where confusion reigns, or so it seems. We live in an age where information is abundant. Yet, genuinely, clarity feels harder than ever to achieve. Everywhere we turn, there are voices claiming to tell us the truth. But some of these voices are louder than others, especially these self-styled truth tellers who promise to illuminate what's really happening behind the scenes. We have to ask the hard questions. What are these truth tellers giving us? Are they giving us the full picture? Do they even have the full picture themselves? Or are they, whether knowingly or unknowingly, part of a broader strategy to manage the awakening masses, keeping them distracted or pacified, while the real players, the architects of global strategies, remain unseen and unaccountable? Now I want to share with you a collage of truth tellers. What you're looking at is just a collage of individuals who have emerged as prominent voices in the truth-seeking communities. Figures like these present themselves as insiders with secret knowledge or unique insight. These individuals have built a following by questioning mainstream narratives and offering alternative viewpoints. I wonder, how many do you follow? Or did you follow, and why did you stop following them? Now, they come from a variety of backgrounds. There are journalists, actual former insiders, whistleblowers, media personalities, and just independent commentators. Their appeal comes from the fact that they resonate deeply with people who feel disillusioned, unheard, or misled by traditional institutions. For many people, these truth tellers represent hope, a light in the fog of confusion. They challenge the official stories. They speak candidly about issues others shy away from. They offer answers, even if those answers aren't always fully accurate. In a world where trust in institutions has eroded, these figures have stepped in to fill the void. The questions we need to ask are they truly independent? Or are they knowingly or unknowingly contribute to a controlled opposition? As we look at these faces many of you may trust, ask yourself, what is it that draws you to them? Is it their message, their passion, or the hope they represent? And more importantly, how do you discern when their message aligns with truth versus just another layer of the narrative? Now, this collage represents more than individuals. It represents a larger movement of people seeking answers in a world full of deception, and the truth is rarely simple or easy to find. These figures may guide us, but ultimately, it's up to us to do the hard work of discerning facts from fiction. So these so-called truth tellers may not be as independent as we think. They could be playing a role, intentionally or unintentionally, in order to manage the people who are awake and keeping them from taking drastic action. They're holding space as the broader global strategy unfolds. It's a challenging concept. It's one that forces us to question not only their motives, but also our own assumptions about what truth is and how we find it. Now, these figures have risen to prominence for their willingness to challenge the mainstream narratives. But what if they're missing key pieces of the puzzle? Or worse, what if they're part of a larger plan to misdirect us? So let's peel back the layers and explore not just what these truth tellers say, but also why their voices resonate, why their audience remain loyal despite inconsistencies, and what role they might play in managing societal dissent. Along the way, let's examine the psychological, cultural, and even physiological barriers that make it so hard for people to discern truth in the first place. This episode will challenge you to reconsider what you think you know about the truth. It's not just about identifying misinformation. It's about understanding the role of these truth tellers may play, how media and institutional narratives manipulate us, and how our own biases and toxic environments might hinder our ability to see the truth clearly. We need to follow the message, not the messenger. We need to use critical thinking to evaluate what they're saying and always ask the question, is this the full truth or just a piece of it? So we're going to go a little deeper. It's going to be unfiltered, uncensored, and absolutely unapologetic. So let's begin by unpacking what truth means in today's world. So what is truth? Now that's a question that philosophers, scientists, and theologians have grappled with for centuries. Is the truth objective, something that exists independently of our beliefs and perceptions? Or is it subjective, shaped by our own individual experiences, perspectives, cultures, and even biases? In the modern world, the lines between objective and subjective truth have become incredibly blurry. How often do you encounter conflicting narratives in your own life, whether in the news, on social media, or even among friends and family? One side insists that they hold the truth, while the other side claims the exact opposite. Both sides might present compelling evidence, leaving you feeling confused, frustrated, or even apathetic. This isn't accidental. We're living in what many call the age of information overload, where conflicting narratives flood our screens daily. One side says one thing, the other side says the absolute opposite. Both claim to have the evidence. Both demand that you trust them. It's like being dropped in the middle of a tug of war with no clear way to determine who's pulling you closer to reality. The sheer volume of information available to us creates a paradox. Instead of finding clarity, we're drowning in a sea of competing truths. And here's the kicker. As human beings, we're not naturally wired to process this much information critically. Now, truth isn't always comfortable. Often, it challenges our deepest held beliefs, forcing us to confront uncomfortable realities. And yet, as human beings, we are wired to seek out information that confirms what we already believe. This is a phenomenon known as confirmation bias. When faced with information that contradicts our worldview, we experience cognitive dissonance, a mental discomfort that many of us instinctively avoid by rejecting the new information altogether. This is one of the reasons truth feels so elusive. The challenge isn't just identifying the facts, it's overcoming our own psychological barriers to understanding and accepting those facts. One of the biggest barriers to truth is our own mind. Human beings are naturally prone to confirmation bias. This means we seek out information that confirms what we already believe while ignoring or dismissing anything that contradicts our worldview. It's a mental shortcut that helps us feel secure and validated, but it also blinds us to alternative perspectives. If you believe something to be true, you're more likely to notice, remember, and value information that supports that belief while dismissing anything that contradicts it. Think about it. Have you ever scrolled through social media, clicked on an article that reinforced your opinion and felt a little jolt of satisfaction? That's confirmation bias at work. On the flip side, how often have you encountered information that made you feel uncomfortable, something that challenged your belief? If like most people, your instinct was probably to reject it and to call it bias or fake. When we're presented with information that challenges our belief, it creates a sense of mental discomfort called cognitive dissonance. It's the feeling you get when the world doesn't align with the story you've been telling yourself. Instead of sitting with that discomfort and examining the evidence objectively, many of us choose the easier path, rejecting the new information outright. For example, imagine you've spent years trusting a particular news source or political leaders. Suddenly, you're presented with the evidence that they've been dishonest. And who hasn't gone through that recently? I think that's everyone. Accepting that evidence would mean admitting you were wrong to trust them. And that's a painful realization. So many people take the easier route. They reject the new information and cling to their original beliefs. Now, this isn't just a psychological quirk, it's a survival mechanism. Our brains are wired to avoid discomfort and maintain a sense of stability. But in the context of seeking truth, this mechanism can become a significant barrier. So when someone says, "How can people not see the truth?" the answer often lies in psychology, not logic. The challenge of finding truth just isn't external, it's deeply internal as well. Now, add onto that the layer of the sheer volume of information we're exposed to every day. Now, according to recent studies, the average person consumes more than 34 gigabytes of information daily. That's the equivalent of watching 16 movies in a single day, every day. It's no wonder we feel overwhelmed. This constant barrage creates a paradox. On one hand, we have access to more information than ever before. And on the other hand, the sheer volume makes it harder to discern what's true and what's not. So we end up relying on shortcuts, like trusting certain sources or following certain figures just to make sense of it all. Now let's talk about those so-called truth tellers. These individuals have risen to prominence in recent years by challenging mainstream narratives and positioning themselves as beacons of clarity in a murky world, or as insiders to access with hidden knowledge. They challenge the official stories, question the motives of powerful institutions, and provide answers to audience who feel disillusioned with traditional sources of information. Now, these individuals occupy an interesting space in the information landscape. They appeal to people who feel disillusioned with mainstream media by offering these alternative explanations and predictions. They frame themselves as insiders and people with access to knowledge the average person doesn't have. So at first glance, their appeal is obvious. In a world where government, media outlets, and corporations have repeatedly been caught lying, isn't it natural to seek out alternative voices? But again, the question we need to ask, are these truth tellers actually giving us the full picture? And why do these truth tellers resonate so deeply with their audiences? Part of it has to do with those psychological factors we just discussed, confirmation bias and cognitive dissonance. These figures often validate the suspicions their audience already have. If you believe mainstream media is lying to you, a truth teller that confirms that belief becomes instantly credible. But it goes deeper than that. For many people, these figures offer something that's been missing from their lives: a sense of control. In a chaotic world, the idea that someone has insider knowledge, that someone understands what's really happening, is incredibly comforting. Let's be clear. Their appeal isn't hard to understand. In a world where institutions have repeatedly lied or withheld information, it's natural to gravitate towards voices that seem authentic, that seem to challenge the status quo. And occasionally they get things right. Maybe a prediction about a specific event, or maybe an insight that resonates deeply with the audience will keep them coming back. But here's where it gets tricky. Many of their predictions don't come to pass. Their timelines often fall apart, and yet their followers remain loyal. You have to ask why. Because for many people, belief isn't about accuracy, it's about validation. If these truth tellers offer even a shred of evidence that aligns with what their audiences already suspect or what they want to believe, that's often enough to sustain their credibility. This is just basic human psychology. Even when someone is frequently wrong, a single correct prediction can cement their credibility. It's the same mechanism that keeps gamblers coming back to the casino after a small win. For followers of these truth tellers, one accurate statement can overshadow a dozen inaccuracy. Now let's consider a provocative idea. What if these truth tellers are serving a purpose beyond what we see on the surface? What if their role is just to hold space for those who are awake? Here's what I mean by that. The world is indeed undergoing massive shifts, politically, socially, economically. In the interest of those in power to manage dissent, one way to do that is to elevate figures who can channel the energy and frustration of the awake into narratives that keep them occupied and, more importantly, nonviolent. Whether intentional or not, these truth tellers might be acting as a kind of release valve. They provide enough validation to keep their audience encouraged, but not enough actionable information to provoke real change. Now, that's a sobering thought, but it's one worth considering. And here's the thing. Even these truth tellers likely don't have the full picture. They aren't part of that small group, let's call them the 10, who truly are in control. These truth tellers operate within a limited framework, just like the rest of us. So this brings us to the broader issue of media and institutional narratives. As we discussed in episode 42, the Smith Modernization Act of 2012 legalized propaganda within the United States. This means that the government can now disseminate information to its own citizens that is designed to shape public opinion, not necessarily to inform. Think about that. The very institutions we rely on for information, news outlets, government agencies, even educational institutions, are incentivized to present narratives that serve their own agendas. Whether it's governments pushing policies, health officials prioritizing profits, or media outlets chasing sensationalism, the result is the same: a manipulated, fragmented version of reality. This is why it is so important to question everything. The surface material we receive is designed to guide us toward a specific conclusion. To uncover the truth, we actually have to go deeper. So why do some people see through the lies while others don't, even when it's right in front of them? In my opinion, one of the major factors is physical and mental toxicity. From the food we eat to the water we drink and the chemical we expose ourselves to daily, our bodies and mind are under constant assault. What we eat, drink, and expose ourselves to daily has a profound impact on our ability to think clearly. Processed foods, GMOs, fluoride in tap water, and synthetic chemicals all contribute to a toxic environment. When our bodies are overwhelmed by toxins, it's just not our physical health that suffers. Our mental clarity and critical thinking skills are compromised as well. Now add to that the psychological toxicity of 24/7 news cycles and social media, and it's no wonder so many people feel overwhelmed and disconnected. The constant barrage of fear-based news, social media arguments, and divisive narratives creates a kind of mental fog that makes it even harder to discern truth from lies. So what's the solution? Detoxification. And I don't mean a juice cleanse. Detoxification needs to happen on multiple levels: physical, mental, and even spiritual. When we clean up our diets, reduce our exposure to harmful chemicals, and take control of what we consume mentally, we create the clarity we need to process information critically and become better equipped to discern truth. So what we can do? What can we do? How do we navigate this complex web of misinformation and half-truths? Well, the first step is to take responsibility for our own pursuit of truth. This means questioning narratives, doing our own research, and sharpening our critical thinking skills. It also means learning to trust our intuition. Now, intuition isn't some mystical force, it's the sum of our experiences, knowledge, and subconscious processing. When something doesn't feel right, that's often a signal worth paying attention to. And at the same time, we need to accept that uncovering the full truth will take time. Just as we spent decades being conditioned by lies, it will take years of consistent effort to deprogram ourselves and rebuild our understanding of reality. Finally, we must focus on detoxifying our mind and body. By prioritizing physical, mental health, and spiritual health and growth, we'll create the clarity we need to navigate the complex web of misinformation that surround us. Now, this episode is meant to challenge you to reconsider what you think you know about truth. It's not just about identifying misinformation. It's about understanding the role of these truth tellers may play, how media and institutional narratives manipulate us, and how our own biases and toxic environments might hinder our ability to see the truth clearly. I want to leave you with this thought. The search for truth is not a destination, but a journey. It requires courage, perseverance, and an unwavering commitment to clarity. Truth is out there, but it won't come to us easily. We have to earn it. It is for us to use our own discernment, but ultimately place our trust in God. I want to thank you for joining me on this exploration of truth, unfiltered, uncensored, and unveiled. If you found value in today's discussion, please share this episode and subscribe to the Sovereign Sisters podcast on Rumble and YouTube channels. I want you to know this is the last live episode for 2024. I hope you'll join me on January 6, 2025 for a discussion on consciousness and intrinsic natural law with my special guest, Ken Bartle. I want to wish everyone a Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, and a joyous New Year. And until then, I want you to stay curious, stay critical, and stay committed to uncovering the truth. And God bless.